Hi everyone, this is Patrick Lee from Uptime Software, one of the solutions architects here at Uptime. And thank you for joining us today. And today's topic, we're going to be talking about 3 simple steps for total control of IT capacity. So I'm just going to go through a few quick slides here and walk you through some of the basic frameworks that we've developed over the time. And let's get started. Now, before we begin and dive into the details, let's step back a little bit and talk about why capacity management is so important. Right? Over the years, we've worked with customers and clients, and what we've found is that a lot of their IT infrastructure always comes down to 2 key issues. The first issue is, what we found is that a lot of IT organizations, about 65% of all help desk tickets are directly or indirectly related to capacity issues. Now, for example, memory might be running out on a server, a database server might not have enough capacity for CPU. So a lot of the day-to-day issues are caused by simple capacity issues. And that's really unfortunate because capacity is a problem that can be managed and can be avoided. That means more than 50% of help desk issues are completely avoidable. The end user should not have to go through the pain of these issues. And the second key issue that we found was that it's all about the money at the end of the day. Right? On average, there are about 30 to 50% of resources that are wasted on a daily basis. Right? For example, $100,000 worth of hardware gets rolled out to handle the capacity, but it might never turn out that you ever hit that capacity, or maybe it only happens during a certain time of the day. So you're looking at 50% of the resources that can be reclaimed and put into better use for applications that really need them. So with things like CPU, memory, and I/O, although they're so cheap nowadays, but it's still a better usage of those resources if you can allocate them to places that really need them. And as for SANs, you guys all know how expensive SANs are, and it takes a lot of time to roll them out and even to put out a new SAN. Right? So there's a lot of time saving that can be had if you use those resources in a more efficient manner. And then lastly, we have time and staff. This is where you can really save a lot of money if you don't have to spend the time to troubleshoot performance issues due to capacity. Right? Not getting ahead in managing your capacity will really hurt your IT infrastructure or IT organization and potentially even cause embarrassment if you don't have a handle on capacity. So I'm going to walk you through 3 simple steps on how to master IT capacity. The first step is how to make a case for capacity management for your organization. Step 2 is a basic framework to gain control of your IT capacity position and understand where you are today. And step 3, the whole point is to get you started so that you're 1 step ahead of the capacity of your environment and deliver high quality services that your end users are expecting. Now, as you may know already, Uptime has been in the IT infrastructure management business for more than a decade, and this basic framework that I'm about to show you has proven to help organizations in various sizes to move forward in the capacity management. Now, I'm just going to bring you a little closer to home here. I'm going to share a little experience that I've had recently. I've been working with a gentleman by the name of Dave, and he was hired on as a senior application manager at a major Canadian telco. He's very excited about taking on this role. He's part of a team managing 40 application clusters and thousands of server instances, both physical and virtual. Now, although he's excited, as he started working there, he realized that the planning approach for capacity is really based on the use of Excel and lots of guesswork. Now, they do have some basic capacity processes in place where all the different application managers will sit in a room once a week just to review each other's data and try to make decisions based on those data about capacity management. But unfortunately, there wasn't enough discipline on how the data was created and presented. And what happens is it caused the application managers to not being able to make decisions on how much capacity they really need, and where the resources should be located is something that they really go on and just guess. So there's clearly a deadlock in the organization in dealing with proactive capacity management. And again, this is really unfortunate because their end users are suffering or will suffer because of this. Now, the first step in making or in managing your IT capacity is to make a case for it in your organization. Right? So this, what they've noticed is that capacity management is almost a dirty word in the organization. When that word capacity management is brought up, they think about how it's a multi-million-dollar project and you have to bring in external consultants and wait 12 to 24 months just to see any results. But really, basic capacity planning is a basic problem. There are really three questions that you have to answer. Right? The first one is, how much capacity do I have? Am I using it? And when will I run out? Now, by simplifying the problem to these questions, the capacity problem is much easier to grasp. There are solutions out there that goes super granular and have tons and tons of detailed metrics, but in reality, most organizations do not need that level of details. The second challenge is more of a business problem. The challenge here is that we need to be able to build trust with the business and IT so that IT can support the business through the growth. Dave needs to answer questions like, can I expand business? Can I expand the sales by 50%? Will our website handle 1 million visitors? Or can we hire 10% more staff this year? Now, as an application manager, Dave is expected to know the answer to all these questions, but unfortunately, he didn't have the appropriate tools in place that would give him the accurate answers in the eyes of the business stakeholders. He needs to be able to plan ahead and answer these questions if they're really to continue to support the growth of the business and make sure that IT is not a dragging factor. And lastly, Dave also found that the organization is in a classic capacity enigma where there's an overspend versus underprepared approach. What he found was 30 to 50% of resources are unused, except, of course, for storage. It doesn't matter how much storage you buy and how much you allocate, people will always find a way to use it. And also what he also found was that 65% of all service outages are related to capacity issues. Now, it's completely avoidable. Right? It's causing a lot of embarrassment for the application manager when you have end users calling them and complaining about the bad user experience and outages on the front end. With proper capacity planning, this can totally be avoided. And once we've identified these three steps and these 3 points here, Dave can use these points to build a strong case on why his organization needs to have a real capacity planning process. So what we've done is we've advised Dave to get an understanding of where he currently is in capacity today. And step one of that, it's all about trust. It's about building trust in the data that you have. So this can be done by implementing a single monitoring platform. Traditionally, especially in large IT environments, organizations are split into different silos. Right? You have your application team, you have your DBAs, the network team. Each has their own tools and their own metrics in Dave's organization. And this was exactly the case. And what we noticed is that there's a lot of different finger pointing going on, and there's a lot of inconsistent metrics coming in from all the different teams. Right? When you're doing capacity planning, each team in Dave's environment, they would bring their own data in massive Excel spreadsheet and try to do capacity planning based on that data. Now let's be clear on one thing here. Excel is not a capacity planning tool. It's easy to make mistakes in Excel, as we all know, but more importantly, it's prone to different interpretation on the same data set. And this is because each team starts off with different sources of the data and importing that data from these sources. This leads to a mistrust on the data. But very simply, the business just needs basic measurements like CPU, memory, network, disk storage, and queue depth from one single source. If you can get all those different metrics from one single source, everyone will have the single view of truth. Now, step 2 is to define your capacity needs in a single unit of measure. Now, there are 4 things to consider here. The first is the workload. This is where you use business-ready terminology to define the business service. Now, in Dave's example, the end user needs to be able to pay their bills through an online portal, an online billing portal. So that would be the business workload. A second thing you have to consider is you need to define a unit of workload of measurement. So this is going down to the technical level for each workload. So what that means is, let's say going back to the online portal example, you have to define what one workload means in terms of number of transactions, number of requests, and number of page loads. So these are things that the technical people behind the applications can relate to directly to the workload. Number 3 here is the desired service level. So with those two things considered, now you can start planning the desired service level. That means what is our target for response time, what is the percentage availability, and these are service levels that will help you move on to the next step, which is the cost of loss versus cost of service. Now, this is rather a difficult question to answer for some of the organizations that we worked with in the past. But the key here is once you have agreed on the desired level of service, you will need to come up with how much it would cost to implement an environment that would support the desired service level. What happens is that the cost is usually very different from the perceived value or available budget. Right? Say, for example, if you want to implement a perfect service level, you might need to spend $100,000 just for acquiring all the service that you need, but the business might only be able to give you $20,000. So there's a clear gap here, and that is something that you can take back and consider if the desired level is really achievable, or do we need to scale that down closer to the budget? But more importantly, what does the service level really mean? What is the cost if the service is down? Right? If the online billing portal is down, how much money will the organization lose? Right? So having this information will let you develop an ROI to justify the capacity needs for different applications. Now, step 3 here is, now with the capacity needs defined, now you can analyze current capacity. This is where you ask what type of capacity problems you currently have, how much are you using today, and what you want to do here is you want to start building a baseline and work towards testing your assumptions. Right? For example, do we have the number of users that we thought we have? Does that translate to the unit of work that we had expected? Now, to do this properly, you really should have 6 to 12 months of data. But of course, if you're only getting started, you won't have that much data. But that's okay, because everyone has to start from somewhere. Right? And fourthly, after you've analyzed your current capacity, but before you carry out your capacity plan, you need to put out the fires. You cannot proactively manage your capacity if you're stuck fixing outages on a day-to-day basis. Now, by following this framework, after you've done all these steps and have all these steps in place, you can go from being reactive and managing capacity to step 5, which is moving on to proactive capacity management. And the first thing you want to do here is to avoid outages. Right? If you want to be proactive, you want to avoid outages. Now, having all the information that you had from the previous step, now you should be able to know where your current capacity is at, and you should have identified where your critical paths are in your environment. Based on the workload that you're coming into your environment, what are the first points of failures, and where will things likely break? You need to understand the bottlenecks, and you need to be able to monitor them closely. You need to monitor them proactively on a daily basis, maybe even down to a minute, so that you can take a look at them and react to them appropriately if there are any changes in capacity or outages. Now, you need to also start forecasting your workload. And there are 3 basic strategies when it comes to forecasting. Either you want to lead, lag, or match capacity. Of course, the lead approach is the most common one. Organizations usually spend a lot of money in anticipation of the workload. Earlier, I mentioned that 30 to 50% of resources are wasted. Generally, organizations would not only lead, but they will overlead, and they have way more capacity than they really need, so that during the off-peak hours, none of that capacity is being used effectively, which results in wasted resources. The lag approach is the exactly opposite of that. It means that you will only add additional capacity once your capacity is actually consumed. This is definitely a great approach from a cost savings point of view, but it will open you up to risk in terms of lag time to get the capacity online when you need it. If your forecast is off by just a little bit, you might not be able to meet the demand in time. And then you have the match approach, which instead of a massive lead or a trailing lag, you try to match the capacity on more of a frequent basis so that instead of looking at acquiring new hardware twice a year, perhaps looking at the capacity every few weeks and tune your capacity allocation or buy new hardware so that you're always constantly in sync with how much you really need. The goal is to keep the available capacity in line with the capacity demand in your environment. Now, the next point here is you want to plan for future system usage. You need to be able to understand what is the anticipated target of the workload based on the business requirements. There's no value in just defining workload if you can't predict how that workload is going to change. So you definitely need to be able to plan a little on the future usage. And then you also have to prepare for the unknowns. Right? Every forecast is valuable to have, but always be prepared for changing capacity demand outside what you had expected. Unknowns will always occur, but you need to be able to be in a position where you can quickly adjust to those unknowns as they come. And then finally, you need to be able to automate and plan ahead. And you definitely want to automate as much as possible in terms of capacity management process. We talked a little bit about routine reviews and how Dave has meetings with the capacity and application managers once a week to talk about their 40 applications. But what they were doing was really just putting all the data and slamming it into an Excel spreadsheet. And that process alone, just putting all the data together, takes about 60 hours a week, believe it or not. And that's really a lot of time wasted. Right? So this gathering of data should really be automated so that the right info will get to the right person, the right people at the right time and as frequently as possible as well. It's important to send that report out to all the users, to all the teams that are responsible for the application so that they have one consistent set of data to look at. And you also want to routinely review your baseline versus the reality. Now, this goes back to preparing for the unknowns. Definitely check the actual capacity usage against the baseline so you can see if everything is in line. In addition to weekly and monthly reviews, you should probably doing a quarterly review or planning is something that you really want to do in your environment. Now, any forecast should be looking at a 3 to 6 month window, and this will really help you stay one step ahead of the capacity demands in your environment and ensure your end users will receive the service level that you have set out to achieve. Now, I'm just going to walk you through a few examples of how uptime is able to help solve some of these capacity planning issues. And here is a quick screenshot of a sample report in Dave's environment. We're looking at 4 key bottlenecks here: CPU, memory, disk I/O, and network I/O over a certain period of time. And what these 4 charts allows you to do is to easily see what the current total available capacity is, how much capacity you're currently using, and also allows you to do week over week or month over month comparisons versus the previous baseline so you can see whether you're trending upward, downward, or flat line to get an early indication of changes that needs to be made. Now, a second example of how uptime can help is this screenshot here. This is a sample report on CPU, our enterprise CPU utilization report. This is about finding the critical path of where the resource bottlenecks are in an environment. And this report here is going to instantly highlight the grand total from a CPU point of view, how much CPU is available, and how much you're using. You can also see the top offenders. So that's very importantly, you can also compare the peak usage during the day versus the overall usage so you can understand how the change in capacity will impact the availability of your services. And finally, we have one last screenshot here. Now, this is where Dave had mentioned that he needs to be able to see live capacity usage information. Right? So this is an example of that. So this is something that he can put on his knock screen, and he'll be able to see where they're at in terms of the capacity. Right? So here in this dashboard, you can see the current usage of CPU, memory, disk busy, and disk capacity across your entire organization. Now, this answer the questions: what are the levels of usage today versus the maximum of what is the usage and trends over the last 24 hours? Are there spikes? Are there issues that are going on right now that we need to alert on? And you can use that information to proactively manage so that you can meet the agreed upon service level with the users. And we're having said all that, so I have some key takeaways here that I want to share with you. First is that over the years, as I said earlier, what we notice is that there's a lot of poor or non-existent capacity planning out there in the field. And if you're working with your customers, or if you are an end user in an organization there, you might want to poke around and see if you can find other examples of where you can spot where capacity planning is not really properly in place. Secondly, if there isn't any capacity planning in place, this is going to cause businesses to lose productivity and resources. And then what happens is that if you're not using any single monitoring solution or a single solution to manage your capacity planning, Uptime can provide that. Uptime has a unified monitoring capabilities that will provide a single pane of truth for capacity planning. And now I'm going to open up the floor, and if anyone on the call has any questions, feel free to type into the chat window or in the Q&A section, and we can address some of the questions that you might have. All right, looks like we have a question here. Can Uptime automatically send the capacity reports in PDF? So yes, so definitely Uptime is able to do that. You can schedule to have capacity reports or any reports within Uptime and have them automatically be sent out through email into your inbox. We have another question here. What applications can Uptime track capacity on? So Uptime can track capacity on various categories of applications. Now, most, if not all, the popular ones we have coverage for. So for example, for databases, we can track Oracle, SQL Server, MySQL, Sybase. For web servers, we can track IIS, Apache. For application servers, we can track WebSphere, WebLogic, and Tomcat. Now, just in case if Uptime does not have coverage for an application in your environment, Uptime also has a very extensible framework that can pull any metrics from any sources so that we can provide a single pane of truth to meet your capacity planning needs. Okay. All right, another question here. What operating systems can Uptime get capacity metrics for? So similar to the last question, so Uptime has coverage for all the popular operating systems out there. So Windows, Linux, AIX, Solaris, HPUX are all supported. All right, so if there isn't any other question, this is the end of the webinar. So with the last slide there, we have some information for you guys. If you need to contact us, feel free to just send us an email at sales@uptimesoftware.com, and there's a resource center where you can look at and get more information on Uptime software. And thank you for joining us today. Hope you have a great day. Bye for now.